The frost-covered woods surrounding Neuville, Belgium, held an eerie silence on that December morning in 1944, just after 6 in the morning on the 19th day of the month. Inside the cramped confines of a Panther tank's turret, a German Unteroffizier named Klaus Wendel fought against the bitter cold as he attempted to write in his personal journal. His gloved hands made the task difficult, and every breath created visible clouds in the frigid air. He wrote about something that had been haunting German tank crews for days now, an American hunter that they could hear but never actually see with their own eyes. These mysterious enemies struck and disappeared before German turrets could even rotate to face them. Just the previous day, 3 Tiger tanks had been destroyed by this unseen threat. Wendel peered through his commander's cupola into the darkness that preceded dawn, scanning the Ardennes forest where American tank destroyers from the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion were already moving their M18 Hellcats into attack positions beyond the tree line. What this German tank commander could not possibly know was that in less than 20 minutes, everything he understood about armored combat would be completely overturned by an American fighting vehicle that broke every single rule of tank warfare that the Wehrmacht had spent 5 years perfecting through brutal experience. The gun mounted on Wendel's Panther could punch through the armor of any American tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The thick frontal plates on his tank could turn aside most shells fired by Allied forces. This machine represented the absolute peak of German engineering philosophy, combining heavy construction, devastating firepower, and methodical precision. Yet before 3 minutes had passed from the moment of first contact with the enemy, Wendel would watch multiple German tanks get destroyed by vehicles moving at speeds that German armor could not achieve even on smooth paved highways. The massive German offensive in the Ardennes was now entering its 4th day of combat. Throughout the frozen forests stretching across Belgium and Luxembourg, German tank crews were coming to a horrifying realization. The Americans had constructed something that hunted in a manner completely unlike any armored vehicle that had ever existed in military history. It was not more powerful than German tanks, nor was it more heavily protected. It was simply faster than anything anyone believed could possibly survive on a battlefield. The story of how the M18 Hellcat came into existence began in December of 1941, precisely when America joined the war. German tank doctrine had evolved from fundamental principles emphasizing overwhelming firepower and maximum protection, which led them to build Panthers weighing 45 tons and King Tigers that tipped the scales at nearly 70 tons. American designers working at General Motors took an approach so radically different that it would terrify German crews 3 years into the future. General Leslie McNair's directive on November 21st in 1941 established the Tank Destroyer Force, which operated according to a straightforward principle that was documented in their field manual. The emphasis fell squarely on speed and firepower rather than armoured protection. The M18, which carried the designation T-70 during its development phase, would embody this philosophy to such an extreme degree that German tank designers would have considered it suicidal. The contract went to Buick Motor Division in Flint, Michigan in January of 1942. Chief Engineer Joseph Roberts received specifications that appeared to contradict each other fundamentally. He needed to mount a high-velocity 76mm gun capable of destroying any German tank in existence. He had to maintain a low profile that would aid in concealment. He needed to achieve speeds in excess of 50 miles per hour. All of this had to be accomplished while keeping the total weight under 20 tons. The solution they developed defied every convention of traditional tank design. The armour on the M18 measured a mere 25.4 millimeters at its very thickest point on the front of the turret, with the whole front protected by only 12.7 millimeters, barely sufficient to stop heavy machine gun rounds. A German 88mm shell would not just penetrate this armour, it would pass completely through both sides of the vehicle. The design prioritized mobility above every other consideration. creating what military historians would eventually describe as the fastest tracked armoured fighting vehicle to see service during the entire Second World War. The first Hellcats arrived in Europe during early 1944, initially seeing combat in Italy with the 894th Tank Destroyer Battalion. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion became the first unit in the European theatre to actually receive M18s in May of that year, coming ashore at Utah Beach on the 13th of July. But the real introduction came during the breakout from Normandy, where German tank crews first encountered what would become their recurring nightmare. Near the town of Coutances in France on July 29th in 1944, elements of German heavy tank battalions filed disturbing reports about engagements with American tank destroyers that vanished before the Germans could even return fire. After action reports documented enemy vehicles exhibiting speeds that German observers estimated at 80 km per hour over rough terrain, with total engagement times from first shot to last sighting of approximately 180 seconds. The mathematics involved were brutally simple and utterly terrifying for German crews. A Panther tank required a full 60 seconds to complete one complete rotation of its turret. Its maximum speed reached 34 miles per hour on roads and only 15 miles per hour when crossing rough country. The M18 Hellcat could accelerate from a standstill to 30 miles per hour in 7 seconds, maintain 55 miles per hour on roads and 60 without the governor, and sustain 26 miles per hour across rough terrain. In the 3 minutes it took a German crew to identify the threat, rotate their turret to face it, acquire the target properly and fire their gun, a Hellcat could displace nearly 1.5 miles from its original position. This fear that gripped German tank crews was not irrational in any way. The 76mm M1A2 gun mounted on the M18, while unable to penetrate the frontal armour of a Panther with standard M62A armour-piercing ammunition, could easily defeat the 40mm side armour at 1,500 metres. With M93 high-velocity armour-piercing ammunition using tungsten cores, though these were severely limited in supply with crews receiving only 1 or 2 rounds monthly, penetration reached 157mm at 500 yards. The muzzle velocity of 2,600 feet per second meant the shell arrived at its target before the sound of the shot could reach German ears. German doctrine emphasized methodical engagement of targets, careful target acquisition, deliberate aiming, conservation of ammunition. Crews drilled extensively on fighting from static positions, using terrain features to place their tanks in hull-down positions. The Panther and Tiger were specifically designed to support this doctrine, carrying heavy armour, powerful guns, and advancing slowly but steadily. The Hellcat shattered every single aspect of this carefully developed training. Crews training on the M18 at Camp Hood in Texas, which had been established specifically as the Tank Destroyer Tactical and Firing Center on 158,706 acres, were taught to never remain stationary for longer than 30 seconds after firing their gun. The motto they lived by became standard doctrine. Speed is life. Where German doctrine emphasized landing the decisive shot, American tank destroyer doctrine preached shoot and scoot tactics. Between July of 1943 and October of 1944, the Buick plant in Flint produced exactly 2,507 M18 Hellcats, far fewer than the originally planned 8,986 vehicles. Production included 6 pilot models, an initial contract for 1,000 vehicles, and a final order of 1,507 units. Peak monthly production reached 267 units in November of 1943. This production rate, while modest when compared to Sherman tank output, still exceeded German Panther production figures. While Germany struggled to produce 90 Panthers monthly by late 1944, American factories had already completed their entire Hellcat production run. This disparity meant that while German crews knew each lost Panther or Tiger was essentially irreplaceable, given their production difficulties, American forces could rapidly replace any losses sustained in combat. The M18 featured a Wright R975 radial engine that had originally been designed for aircraft applications. Early production vehicles used the naturally aspirated R975C1 producing 350 horsepower, while later models received the supercharged R975C4, generating 400 horsepower beginning in March of 1944. This power output, combined with the vehicle's weight of 17.7 to 20 tons, depending on configuration, created an exceptional power-to-weight ratio of 20 to 22.5 horsepower per ton, compared to the Panthers' 15 horsepower per ton. The hydromatic automatic transmission with torque converter allowed drivers to maintain maximum speed while maneuvering, a critical advantage over German tanks that required manual shifting. The ground pressure of 10.5 pounds per square inch, less than many wheeled vehicles produced, meant Hellcats could traverse mud and snow that completely immobilized 57-ton Tigers and 69.8-ton Tiger IIs. The breakout from Normandy in August of 1944 provided the first large-scale demonstration of Hellcat doctrine in actual combat. During Operation Cobra, beginning on July 28th, the 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, which had received their M18 in October of 1943 and landed at Utah Beach between July 21st and 22nd, participated in the rapid sweep through Brittany. The 704th and 705th Battalions, also equipped with M18, joined this rapid advance. Traditional tank warfare doctrine would have dictated careful, covered approaches and sustained firefights. Instead, M18 crews executed what became known as rapid flanking attacks, using their superior speed to strike from completely unexpected directions before German turrets could even traverse to meet the threat. The battle, fought near Aracourt from September 18th to 29th in 1944, near the Nancy bridgehead across the Moselle River, demonstrated the M18's full potential when properly employed according to its design doctrine. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, attached to Combat Command A of the 4th Armoured Division, faced elements of the German 113th Panzer Brigade in conditions that should have strongly favoured the defending forces. On September 19th, Lieutenant Edwin Leiper's platoon engaged German armour in heavy fog at extremely close range with visibility limited to just 30 feet. In the first 5 minutes of this engagement, his M18s destroyed 5 German tanks while losing just 1 vehicle. The engagement continued with 10 additional enemy tanks destroyed in exchange for losing 2 more M18. Captain Tom Evans earned the Distinguished Service Cross after personally manning the gun of a disabled M18 to destroy enemy panzers at point-blank range. The overall results at Aracourt were absolutely staggering. 39 German tanks destroyed in exchange for 4 M18s destroyed and 3 damaged, producing a kill ratio of 5.6 to 1 that completely validated the tank destroyer concept that many had doubted. The Ardennes offensive in December of 1944 became the proving ground where the Hellcat earned its most legendary reputation. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, described by General A.D. Bruce as the finest tank destroyer battalion yet trained by the Army, rushed to defend Bastogne and provided critical armoured support for the surrounded 101st Airborne Division. On December 19th and 20th in 1944, near the village of Neuville, M18s from both the 609th and 705th Tank Destroyer Battalions engaged elements of the 2nd Panzer Division in fierce combat. The 609th arrived first with Team Desaubry, with Lieutenant David K. Hagan's platoon of 4 M18 achieving truly remarkable results. One vehicle knocked out 7 German tanks while another destroyed 5, losing only 1 M18 while destroying 14 enemy tanks total. The 705th, under Lieutenant Colonel Clifford D. Templeton, reinforced late on December 19th with approximately 12 M18. The combined force helped destroy at least 30 German tanks over 2 days of intense fighting, inflicting 600 to 1,000 German casualties while achieving a crucial 48-hour delay of the German advance. The 705th would later receive a Presidential Unit citation for their actions at Bastogne from December 18th to 27th in 1944. On Christmas Day of 1944 alone, the 705th destroyed 27 German tanks while losing 6 M18s in combat against the 15th Panzergrenadier Division, maintaining their exceptional kill ratios even during the most desperate fighting of the entire battle. Overall, during the siege of Bastogne, the 705th destroyed approximately 40 German tanks in exchange for 6 M18 losses, achieving a kill ratio of 6.7 to 1. The advantages the Hellcat possessed actually increased under adverse conditions. While German heavy tanks struggled terribly in mud and snow, the M18's lightweight construction and low ground pressure allowed it to maintain mobility when heavier vehicles bogged down completely. During the opening phase of the bulge, heavy fog grounded air support and limited visibility to under 100 meters. German doctrine relied heavily on long-range gunnery superiority, which was now completely negated by weather. Hellcat crews, trained specifically for close-range ambush tactics at Camp Hood's Revolutionary Battle Conditioning course, thrived in these exact conditions. The lightweight construction of the M18 provided strategic mobility that German heavy tanks could never match. While a King Tiger required Class 70 bridges, which were extremely rare in Europe, the M18 could cross any Class 24 bridge, basically any structure that could support a loaded truck. This advantage proved absolutely decisive during Rhine crossing operations. While German heavy tanks searched desperately for intact bridges strong enough to support their massive weight, Hellcats crossed freely on temporary structures erected by combat engineers. While American factories built 2,507 M18 Hellcats between July 1943 and October 1944, Germany struggled throughout the entire war to produce their heavy tanks in meaningful numbers. Total Panther production reached approximately 6,000 vehicles over the course of the war, while only 492 King Tigers and 1,347 Tiger Ears were ever constructed. The mathematics of industrial capacity were completely inescapable. For every Panther Germany produced, America built 8 tank destroyers and tanks in total. German tank crews faced not just superior tactics, but utterly overwhelming numbers that they could never hope to match. German tank crew training in 1944 emphasized the same methodical engagement they had always practiced: careful target acquisition, deliberate aiming, conservation of ammunition. By late 1944, veteran German tank crews had become increasingly rare as casualties mounted. Replacement crews received minimal training, sometimes just 2 weeks of hasty instruction before facing actual combat conditions. American Hellcat crews, conversely, received extensive and thorough training at Camp Hood in Texas, later renamed Fort Hood. The Tank Destroyer School's program included 17 weeks of intensive training with strong emphasis on speed, mobility, and individual initiative. The facility, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel and later Brigadier General Andrew D. Bruce, could train 100,000 soldiers simultaneously, with 28 battalions and 8 groups in various stages of preparation at any given time. Crews practiced high-speed firing, rapid displacement, and coordinated attacks until these maneuvers became completely instinctive reactions. The Revolutionary Battle Conditioning course, originally called the Tank Hunting course, became the first training in the entire US Army to employ live fire, with trainees spending a full week in simulated combat conditions under actual fire. This realistic training proved invaluable when crews faced real German tanks. By late 1944, American tank destroyer doctrine had evolved considerably from initial concepts to proven combat techniques validated by battle. Field Manual 18-5, published in June of 1942, stated clearly that there was but one battle objective for tank destroyer units: the destruction of hostile tanks. General Bruce later clarified that seek meant vigorous reconnaissance, strike meant destruction through gunfire rather than charging into contact, and destroy meant elimination through superior tactics rather than simple firepower. Combat experience in North Africa and Italy modified these initial concepts significantly. The battles fought in North Africa taught that pure offensive charges were absolutely suicidal against prepared defences. Instead, aggressive spirit combined with stealth and deception became the cornerstone of successful tank destroyer employment in combat. M18 crews developed what they called wolfpack tactics. 3 or 4 Hellcats operating in coordinated but independent attacks, communicating constantly by radio to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining constant movement that prevented German gunners from acquiring steady targets. By the end of the war in Europe, M18 Hellcat units had achieved truly remarkable combat statistics. Army records document 526 total enemy armoured vehicle kills, with 498 in Europe, 17 in Italy, and 11 in the Pacific Theatre. With approximately 216 M18s lost to enemy fire in the European theatre alone, this produced an overall kill-to-loss ratio of 2.4 to 1, or 2.3 to 1 specifically in Europe. This was the highest ratio achieved by any American tank or tank destroyer during the entire Second World War. Individual unit achievements often exceeded even these impressive averages by significant margins. The 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed upwards of 90 enemy armoured fighting vehicles during their combat service. The 704th achieved similar numbers, with their Aracourt engagement alone accounting for 39 confirmed kills. The 705th's performance at Bastogne, 40 tanks destroyed for 6 lost, demonstrated sustained excellence under the most difficult conditions imaginable. The 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion achieved the highest documented ratio at nearly 233 to 1. Analysis of loss causes revealed that 40 to 50% of M18 casualties resulted from enemy tanks and anti-tank guns, exploiting the vehicle's minimal armour protection when they managed to score hits. Another 25 to 35% stemmed from mechanical breakdowns in the field. Remaining losses came from infantry anti-tank weapons, artillery fire, and mines encountered during operations. The fundamental difference between German and American armoured vehicle design philosophy becomes crystal clear when directly comparing specifications. The Panther weighed exactly 44.8 to 45 tons, with 80mm frontal armour sloped at 55 degrees, creating effective protection equivalent to approximately 140mm. The Tiger I weighed 57 tons with 100mm vertical frontal armour. The King Tiger reached a massive 69.8 tons with 150mm sloped frontal armour and 180mm turret armour, providing nearly impenetrable protection from the front. Against this formidable protection, the M18 weighed just 17.7 to 20 tons, with armour ranging from a mere 12.7mm on the hull to 25.4mm on the turret front, thinner than some German armoured cars used for reconnaissance. Yet this apparent vulnerability enabled the speed that became its primary defensive characteristic. At 500 metres distance, a Hellcat moving perpendicular at 40 miles per hour would cross a Tiger's gun arc in just 4.5 seconds, faster than any gunner could physically track the target with manual traverse after hydraulic failure, which was a common combat occurrence as systems broke down under stress. Beyond raw speed, the M18 demonstrated superior mechanical reliability compared to German heavy tanks throughout extended operations. The Wright R975 radial engine, derived directly from proven aircraft designs, started reliably even in sub-zero conditions that plagued German vehicles. German tank crews, using diesel engines that required careful warm-up procedures before operation, could not understand how Hellcats could start instantly and accelerate immediately to combat speed. The Panther's sophisticated transmission, while technically advanced and impressive on paper, proved fragile under actual combat conditions. Final drive failures plagued the design throughout its entire service life and caused countless breakdowns. The Tiger II's extreme complexity meant that more of these vehicles were lost to mechanical failure than to enemy action. Meanwhile, the M18's simplified design, using proven automotive components wherever possible, ensured consistent operational readiness that kept more vehicles in the fight. American logistical superiority amplified the M18's effectiveness enormously. While German tanks often sat idle for lack of fuel, spare parts, or ammunition, Hellcat units maintained high operational rates through efficient supply chains that kept them fighting. The famous Red Ball Express and similar logistics operations ensured consistent fuel deliveries, while standardized parts meant easy field maintenance that could be performed by unit mechanics. German forces by late 1944 faced chronic fuel shortages that severely limited operations. The entire Ardennes offensive, given the codename Watch on the Rhine by the Germans, partially aimed to capture Allied fuel dumps because German supplies could not sustain prolonged mobile operations. This desperate fuel situation meant German tanks often fought defensively from static positions, exactly the scenario where the mobile Hellcat held maximum tactical advantage. Every single M18 carried both radio and intercom systems that worked reliably in combat. SCR 508 or SCR 528 radio sets provided consistent communication between vehicles and with higher command. German tanks, especially by late 1944, often operated with degraded or completely non-functional communications equipment, relying instead on signal flags or rigid pre-battle planning that could not adapt to changing situations. This seemingly minor detail had major tactical implications on the battlefield. Hellcat platoons coordinated their attacks in real time, adjusting instantly to German responses and exploiting any weaknesses they discovered. When 4 Hellcats attacked from different directions simultaneously, they operated as a single organism through radio coordination. German tanks, often fighting in communication isolation from each other, could not possibly match this tactical flexibility. Before the Hellcat's legendary performance in northwest Europe captured headlines, the Italian campaign provided German forces with their first clear warnings of what was coming. In May of 1944, during the breakout from the Anzio beachhead, the 894th Tank Destroyer Battalion's Hellcats faced elements of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division in difficult terrain. The rolling hills covered with vineyards and stone walls should have completely neutralized the M18's speed advantage, according to conventional thinking. Instead, the terrain actually amplified their psychological impact on German crews. The Hellcats used their ability to accelerate up 30-degree slopes at speeds German tanks could not achieve even on flat level ground, creating an illusion of omnipresence by appearing at multiple points along ridgelines in rapid succession. German crews reported feeling surrounded by superior numbers when in fact they faced only a handful of vehicles moving at incredible speeds. This early demonstration of Hellcat capabilities in Italy went largely unheeded by German high command, who remained obsessively focused on the Eastern Front, where the vast majority of German armour remained committed against Soviet forces. The winter of 1944 through 1945 proved conclusively that the Hellcat's advantages actually increased rather than decreased under adverse weather conditions. The M18's wide tracks and lightweight construction, producing just 10.5 pounds per square inch of ground pressure, allowed movement through deep snow that trapped heavier vehicles completely. German Tigers and Panthers, already struggling with poor mechanical reliability, found their mobility further reduced by winter conditions that exposed every weakness. During the Battle of the Bulge, Hellcat crews exploited these weather conditions with expert skill. They used their speed to race through areas where German heavy tanks bogged down helplessly, appearing behind German lines in locations where heavy armour was thought completely impossible to deploy. This mobility in poor conditions contributed significantly to the successful defence of Bastogne against overwhelming German forces. German forces attempted various counter-tactics against the growing Hellcat threat as losses mounted. Updated tactical manuals recommended immediate smoke deployment. The instant M18s were identified, essentially blinding themselves in hopes the threat would pass by. Other desperate measures included welding additional track links to side armour for extra protection, though this proved completely ineffective against 76mm rounds. They also created deliberate ambushes using hidden anti-tank guns positioned to catch Hellcats by surprise. Nothing worked with any consistency. The Hellcat's combination of speed, firepower, and tactical flexibility proved completely insurmountable with available German resources and tactics. The vehicle's very presence in a sector altered German behaviour fundamentally. Commanders became extremely reluctant to commit valuable armour without extensive reconnaissance first, thereby sacrificing the initiative and momentum that were essential to German offensive doctrine. In March of 1945, near Remagen, M18s from the 656th Tank Destroyer Battalion crossed the captured Ludendorff Bridge while it was too damaged to support heavier vehicles safely. They established a defensive screen that destroyed 11 German tanks attempting to approach the bridge, including 2 King Tigers that could not maneuver quickly enough in the confined terrain. This action demonstrated perfectly the strategic value of the M18's lightweight construction. While German heavy tanks required specific routes and specially reinforced bridges to move, Hellcats could use absolutely any crossing that supported truck traffic. The final Allied operations into Germany during the spring of 1945 showcased M18 units performing deep penetration raids that German forces could not counter effectively. Hellcat platoons would race 40 or 50 kilometers ahead of main forces, appearing suddenly at critical road junctions or river crossings before German defenders even knew the front lines had been penetrated. These final operations demonstrated the M18 concept brought to full maturity through months of combat experience. Speed as a weapon, mobility as armour, surprise as the primary tactic. German defensive positions carefully designed to stop deliberate attacks by heavy tanks proved completely useless against vehicles that simply raced around them at highway speeds and struck from unexpected directions. Post-war analysis conducted by United States Army historians validated the M18 concept thoroughly, despite its obvious limitations. The 76mm gun's inability to penetrate Panther or Tiger frontal armour with standard ammunition forced complete reliance on flanking attacks, creating missions where the vehicle's extraordinary speed became absolutely essential rather than merely helpful. With standard armour-piercing ammunition achieving only 93mm of penetration at 500 yards and scarce high-velocity armour-piercing rounds in short supply, crews had to close to suicidal ranges for frontal engagements against German heavy tanks. Yet the combat record speaks definitively and cannot be argued against. 526 confirmed kills against 216 combat losses produced the highest kill-to-loss ratio of any American armoured vehicle deployed during the entire Second World War. This remarkable success came not from superior firepower or better protection, but from absolutely revolutionary employment of speed and mobility, combined with superior crew training that German forces could not match. The M18 Hellcat represented far more than just another vehicle in the Allied arsenal. It embodied a completely different conception of how armoured warfare should be conducted. While Germany perfected the tank as a breakthrough weapon and mobile fortress designed to smash through enemy lines, America created something entirely new in military history, the tank destroyer as pure hunter that stalked its prey. The tank destroyer force's motto, seek, strike and destroy, proved remarkably prophetic. By the war's end, American tank destroyer battalions claimed over 11,000 enemy vehicles destroyed in total across all theatres, with Hellcat-equipped units achieving the highest kill ratios among them all. The doctrine emphasized repeatedly that tank destroyers were not tanks and should never fight like tanks. They were hunters that struck from ambush and vanished before the enemy could respond. Beyond purely tactical success on individual battlefields, the Hellcat achieved significant strategic effects that influenced entire campaigns. German armoured reserves, instead of concentrating for offensive operations as their doctrine demanded, were increasingly held back in defensive positions to guard against tank destroyer raids that could appear anywhere. The mere presence of Hellcat units in a sector could freeze German armoured movement for hours, while commanders sought confirmation of their exact locations through reconnaissance. During the Ardennes offensive, intercepted German communications revealed commanders requesting specific verification that no Hellcats were present in their sector before committing precious reserves to attacks. Hours were lost to this reconnaissance. Momentum was sacrificed to caution. The offensive that was supposed to split Allied forces and potentially change the course of the war was partially paralysed by fear of vehicles weighing less than half what a Panther weighed. The 2,507 Hellcats built during the war represented American industrial philosophy perfectly. Not perfection, but practical efficiency achieved through proven methods. While Germany built approximately 6,000 Panthers over 3 years, while struggling constantly with quality control and component shortages, Buick produced all their M18s in just 15 months using proven components and simplified construction methods. German engineers, when they had opportunities to examine captured M18s, noted what they considered apparent crudity in construction. Functional welds rather than perfect joints, armour plates showing tool marks from manufacturing, interior ergonomics that seemed almost accidental rather than carefully designed. Yet this supposedly crude vehicle consistently destroyed German tanks that had been built with watchmaker precision and enormous care. The difference lay fundamentally in design philosophy rather than manufacturing capability. Germany built engineering monuments that represented the peak of what was technically possible. America built practical tools designed to win a war efficiently. Both approaches had merit, but only one proved successful on the battlefield. Behind all the statistics and tactical analysis lay profound human tragedy experienced by young men on both sides. Young German tankers, many still teenagers by 1945, faced an enemy that completely negated everything they had been taught in their training. Their carefully maintained Panthers and Tigers, representing the absolute peak of German engineering achievement, burned just as readily when struck by Hellcat rounds fired from ambush positions they never saw. American crews, while suffering far fewer losses overall, carried their own burdens from this type of combat. The speed that saved their lives also meant striking without warning, often giving German crews absolutely no chance to escape their burning vehicles. The minimal armour protection meant that when M18s were hit successfully, catastrophic losses often resulted, though the open-topped turret design actually improved crew survival rates to over 80% compared to just 35% for German heavy tank crews trapped inside closed turrets. The M18 Hellcat's influence extended far beyond World War II into modern military thinking. Post-war armies around the world studied its employment carefully, recognizing that mobility could trump protection under certain tactical circumstances. Modern military doctrine's heavy emphasis on shoot and scoot tactics, rapid displacement, and mobility as a survival technique all trace their conceptual roots directly back to M18 employment during 1944 and 1945. Today at Fort Moore, formerly known as Fort Benning, a carefully restored M18 Hellcat stands prominently at the Armour School entrance. Its commemorative plaque identifies it as the fastest armoured fighting vehicle of the entire Second World War, and proof that American ingenuity combined with mass production capability could defeat sophisticated enemy tanks through speed and tactical innovation, rather than matching them ton for ton. When comparing specifications, the contrast becomes stark. Panthers weighed 44.8 to 45 tons with 15 horsepower per ton and maximum speed of 34 miles per hour. Tiger is weighed 57 tons with 100mm frontal armour, with only 1,347 produced. Tiger IIs weighed 69.8 tons with 150mm frontal armour, with only 492 ever constructed. The supreme irony of the entire Hellcat story is that German doctrine created the perfect conditions for American success. By building increasingly heavy tanks like Panthers, Tigers, and King Tigers, Germany created slow, road-bound targets that were perfect for Hellcat tactics to exploit. Had Germany continued developing lighter, more mobile tanks instead of pursuing the super-heavy tank concept, the Hellcat's advantages would have been significantly minimized. Every ton added to German tank designs made them more vulnerable to American tank destroyers rather than less. The relentless pursuit of invulnerable supertanks created vehicles that simply could not respond effectively to high-speed warfare. In building mobile fortresses, Germany became vulnerable to enemies that fought like cavalry, like racing cars mounted with powerful guns that struck hard and vanished before retaliation was even possible. The M18 Hellcat proved conclusively that victory does not require the best equipment by any objective measure. Victory requires the right equipment for the specific war being fought, properly employed by well-trained crews. German crews in their magnificent Panthers and Tigers, vehicles that represented engineering excellence, were systematically defeated by American crews in vehicles that seemed impossibly vulnerable by comparison. This remains one of military history's great examples of proper doctrine defeating superior technology. Military historian Stephen Zaloga characterized the M18 as poorly balanced in his analysis, while simultaneously noting that its success was attributable to the training and dedication of its crews rather than its design. Yet this assessment perhaps misses the crucial point entirely. The poor balance of extreme speed over armor protection was precisely what enabled the revolutionary tactics that produced the highest kill-to-loss ratio of any American armored vehicle in the war. For German tank crews fighting in 1944 and 1945, 3 minutes was all the time they had. 3 minutes from the first distant sound of high-revving engines approaching to the impact of 76mm rounds smashing into their tanks. 3 minutes to identify the threat properly, traverse their heavy turret to face it, acquire the rapidly moving target, and fire their weapon, all while the Hellcat was already racing at 55 miles per hour toward its next firing position. 3 minutes that usually ended with their tank burning fiercely and the Hellcat vanishing into the distance, already seeking its next victim. The Hellcat proved beyond any doubt that in modern warfare, speed does not just provide an advantage, it renders traditional strength completely irrelevant. German crews who survived those 3-minute encounters learned a lesson that would fundamentally reshape armored warfare doctrine for decades to come. Sometimes the best armor is simply not being where the enemy can shoot you. Sometimes the most powerful gun is the one that fires from where the enemy does not expect. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from building the strongest tank possible, but from building exactly the right tank for the war you are actually fighting. In those 3 minutes of contact lay the difference between old thinking and new approaches, between fighting the last war and adapting to fight the current one, between pursuing perfection and embracing pragmatism. The M18 Hellcat, under-armoured by any measure, outgunned by German tanks in direct comparison, dismissed by some critics as poorly designed, achieved what German supertanks could not accomplish. It achieved battlefield dominance through speed, intensive training, and revolutionary employment that broke all the established rules. For German tank crews facing M18 Hellcats during those final months of the war, 3 minutes represented a lifetime of combat experience compressed into moments. For most of them, it was all the lifetime they had remaining.